The sunlight hit the glass walls of my office just right that morning, bright enough to feel alive, but not so harsh that it revealed how tired I really was. I sat behind my desk at Hudson Financial Group, the skyline of New York stretching beyond me like a promise I'd already claimed. My assistant had just left a vanilla latte on the edge of my paperwork, and my silk blouse still smelled faintly of lavender detergent. From the outside, I looked like a woman who had it all figured out. Then my phone buzzed. It was an alert from Chase Bank. Unusual activity detected on your credit card. For a second, I froze. My heart did that old, familiar drop, the one I hadn't felt in years. My throat went dry, fingers trembling just enough to make me spill a few drops of coffee onto my skirt. The irony made me laugh softly under my breath. Of course it would happen near my birthday again. I tapped the screen, scrolling through numbers that meant nothing and everything all at once. $36,000, burned out in a single night. My jaw tightened, not because of the money, but because of what it reminded me of, the last time those exact digits vanished, and the faces that looked at me like I was the thief. I thought I'd buried that part of my life. Turns out, the past has a cruel way of finding your billing address. I was 22 when it happened the first time. Fresh out of college, proud of my first real job, still living with my parents in a 2-story home in suburban Ohio. My mom used to brag to her friends that I was the responsible one. I paid my bills on time, never went out much, and saved every bonus I could. That credit card, my first one, felt like proof that I was becoming an adult. Until the morning I found it maxed out. I remember staring at the statement, disbelief turning my stomach cold. $36,000 gone. Designer stores, electronics, a weekend stay in Miami. All within 5 days. My hands shook so badly, I could barely hold the paper. I called the bank in tears, reporting fraud, desperate for answers. Then my parents walked in. My father's expression was already sharp, like he'd made up his mind before I opened my mouth. "So, this is what you've been doing? Shopping sprees behind our backs." "Dad, no," I stammered. "Someone stole my card." Mom's voice was quieter, but the disappointment cut deeper. "Sweetheart, we trusted you. Your father warned me about giving you too much freedom." The words hit harder than the accusation itself. Freedom. Like it was something I'd mishandled, something I wasn't mature enough to deserve. I wanted to scream that I wasn't lying, but their faces were stone. I felt myself shrinking in that room. My voice too small, my truth too fragile. When they refused to believe me, I packed a single suitcase and left that night. I had $600 in savings and a used Toyota that barely started. But I had one thing they couldn't take, my grandmother's letter. It had been tucked inside an old photo album she'd left me before she passed. When the world stops believing in you, darling, that's when you start believing harder. Her handwriting was shaky but strong. I folded that letter and kept it in my wallet like armor. As I drove away from the only home I'd ever known, the city lights ahead blurred with the tears in my eyes. The road was empty, except for the quiet hum of my own resolve. That night, I made myself a promise. If I ever found out who really did it, who took that $36,000 and my family's faith, I wouldn't just get my money back. I'd get my power back. New York was brutal in the beginning. The city didn't care who I was or what I'd lost. Rent drained what little I had left, and rejection letters filled my inbox faster than I could delete them. Still, every night before bed, I'd unfold my grandmother's letter and read that one line until it sank into my bones. Believe harder. I found a job at a small financial consultancy downtown. The pay was miserable, but I learned fast, faster than anyone expected. I'd stay after hours, poring over spreadsheets until my vision blurred. When the office lights went out, I'd study investment trends under the blue glow of my laptop. My coworkers went to bars. I went home to ramen and research. Then one night, everything changed. My manager, Claire Donovan, caught me staying late again. She was one of those women who wore power like perfume, strong, sharp, unforgettable. Instead of scolding me, she asked, "You ever think about running your own firm someday?" I laughed. "Me? I can barely afford subway fare. Claire smiled. That's not what I asked. From then on, she mentored me. She taught me what real independence looked like, how to see numbers as stories, risks as opportunities. When I finally earned my certification and made my first big client pitch, Claire stood in the back of the room, silently mouthing, "Believe harder." It worked. That first deal paid off my car loan and gave me enough to open a tiny consultancy of my own, Harper Advisory. I started from a desk wedged in the corner of my apartment, juggling clients who paid in checks that sometimes bounced. But slowly things shifted. Within 2 years, I'd built a network of small business owners who trusted me. I learned to turn financial chaos into strategy, just like I'd done with my own life. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was teaching others how to protect their money when I'd once lost everything. Social media told a different story, though. My Instagram showed lattes, not ledgers. Sunsets, not success. I didn't post about deals or clients. My parents followed me, and I wasn't ready for them to know who I'd become. Let them think I was still finding my footing.
It was easier that way.
On my 29th birthday, I signed a lease on a sleek office overlooking the Hudson River. I bought my first real suit, black, tailored, with gold buttons that gleamed under the lights. That night, I sat alone by the window, champagne glass in hand, watching the city flicker. I thought of my parents then, their disbelief, their silence. I'd forgiven them in my own way, but I'd never forgotten how quickly they'd chosen suspicion over trust. Still, part of me hoped that one day they'd see me, not the daughter they blamed, but the woman who rebuilt herself from their doubt. What I didn't know was that day was coming sooner than I thought. And when it arrived, they wouldn't be the only ones surprised. The message came out of nowhere. "Mom and Dad are in town. They'd love to see you." It was from my younger brother, Ethan, the golden child who'd always known how to stay in their good graces. I stared at the text for a long time, debating whether I even wanted to open that door again. It had been 7 years since I left home, 7 years since they'd looked me in the eye and called me a liar. Still, something inside me whispered, maybe it's time. So I agreed. We met at my office downtown, the Hudson skyline spilling through the glass like a painting. I made sure everything was perfect. Fresh flowers on the table, soft jazz humming from the speakers, the faint scent of vanilla candles filling the air. I wanted the place to feel like me. Calm, capable, composed. When the elevator doors opened, my mother stepped out first, wearing that familiar, nervous smile. My father followed, eyes scanning the space, as if he couldn't decide whether to be impressed or suspicious. "Wow," Mom breathed. "This is nice." "Harper," Dad said flatly. "Didn't expect you to be, doing so well." I smiled. Neither did anyone else. They sat across from me, the silence stretching awkwardly between us. Finally, Mom cleared her throat. "We heard you're in finance now. Ethan said you've been successful." "I've had a few lucky breaks," I said, pouring coffee into crystal cups. "Enough to keep the lights on." Dad leaned back, studying me. "You always were good with numbers. Guess it paid off." He paused. "We could use your advice, actually. Some bad investments lately. Things got tight after retirement." There it was, the real reason for the visit. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened the drawer behind me and pulled out a small folder. I slid it across the desk toward them. "Before we talk about your finances," I said softly, "you should see something." Inside was a photocopy of an old police report, one filed the week after I'd left home. My voice stayed calm as I explained. "The investigation finally traced where the $36,000 went," I said. "Turns out the charges were made by someone who had access to our Wi-Fi and the home computer. They used my saved credentials." My father frowned. "What are you saying?" I turned the page. The IP address matched Ethan's laptop. My mother gasped. "Ethan? No, that can't be right." I met her eyes gently. "He confessed last year. The police reached out, but I told them not to press charges. He was young. I wanted him to learn, not rot in a courtroom." The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face went pale. Mom's hands trembled around her cup. I lost everything because of that. I continued, my voice steady. Not just the money, my reputation, my family, but I built it back. All of it. I stood, walking to the window. The reflection of the skyline shimmered against the glass like a mirror of who I'd become. This firm, Hudson Financial? It's mine. Harper Advisory merged with them last year. I'm the managing partner now. Mom pressed a hand to her mouth. Oh my God. Dad looked down, shame flickering through his eyes. We didn't know. No, I said quietly. You didn't want to know. I turned back to face them, calm but unflinching. But you do now. For a long time, no one spoke. The hum of the city filled the room, the same city that had once swallowed me whole and now stood beneath my feet. And in that silence, for the first time in years, I wasn't the accused. I was the one holding the truth. My father looked older than I remembered, lines carved deeper across his forehead, pride sagging beneath the weight of regret. My mother couldn't stop wringing her hands, whispering half apologies that never quite reached my ears. For a moment, I just let them sit there, surrounded by the success they once believed I'd never achieve. I wasn't cruel enough to gloat, but I wasn't kind enough to spare them the silence either. Some lessons I'd learned needed to echo. Finally, my father spoke. Harper, we made a mistake. I made a mistake. I should have trusted you. His voice cracked on the word trusted. I took a slow breath, steady and deliberate. You didn't just make a mistake, Dad. You made a choice. You chose to believe the worst of me when I needed you to believe the best. Mom's eyes glistened. We were scared, honey. We thought you'd fallen into something bad. We didn't know how to handle it. I understand fear, I said softly. I lived in it for years. Fear of debt, fear of failure, fear of never being enough for you. I leaned forward. But I learned something. Fear isn't an excuse for betrayal. They nodded, quiet and small. Then I shifted gears, my tone firm but calm. You came here for financial help. I'll give it to you. But there are conditions. Dad straightened slightly, cautious. Conditions? Yes, I said. Not just about money, about honesty. I handed them a new folder, this one clean, crisp and white. Inside was a financial recovery plan tailored for them. I'll help you restructure your debts, refinance the mortgage, and secure a sustainable income. But in return, I need 3 things. I raised a finger. First, complete transparency. Every transaction goes through the joint platform I'll set up. No secrets, no shortcuts. A second finger. Second, family therapy. Not for me, for you two and Ethan. You'll sit in a room together and face what happened. No pretending, no blaming. A third. And third, you stop underestimating me. No more guilt trips, no more treating me like a disappointment you can't admit. I'm your daughter, not your cautionary tale. Mom's lip trembled. We can do that. Dad nodded slowly. You have my word. I softened just a little. Good. Because I'm not trying to punish you. I'm trying to make sure none of us ever repeat the past. They both looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw humility in their eyes. Not pity, not judgment, just understanding. Before they left, Mom stood by the door, hesitating. You've become incredible, Harper. We're proud of you. Truly. I smiled faintly. I didn't need you to be proud. I just needed you to see me. When the door closed behind them, I exhaled deeply, the kind of breath you only take after carrying a decade's worth of weight. The balance had shifted. The little girl, who once begged to be believed, was gone. In her place stood a woman who set the terms and meant them. 2 months later, I met my parents again. This time, not in my office, but at a small coffee shop tucked between a bookstore and a florist. The place smelled like roasted beans and nostalgia, the kind that wrapped around you instead of choking. They looked different.
Softer.
Lighter. My mother had started volunteering at a local shelter. My father had joined a financial literacy group, something he admitted was humbling but necessary. And Ethan, he'd written me a letter. A real one, not a text or an email. It arrived a week before our meeting, the envelope addressed in messy, familiar handwriting. Inside was a single page that said, "I was jealous. You had everything figured out and I wanted to prove I could too. But I ruined it. I ruined us. I'm sorry, Harper. I hope someday I can make it right." I'd read those words over and over until the ink blurred. Now, watching my parents sip coffee across from me, I realized something I hadn't before. He'd already started making it right, just by admitting the truth. Mom reached for my hand across the table. "We've been going to therapy," she said. "It's hard, but it's helping. We talk about things we never did before." I squeezed her hand gently. That's all I wanted, for us to stop pretending. Dad nodded. "You taught us more than we ever taught you. About accountability. About starting over." The afternoon light filtered through the window, warm against my face. For the first time, I didn't feel the sting of that old wound, only the faint scar that proved I'd survived it. When we said goodbye, I didn't feel anger or satisfaction. I felt peace. Not the kind that comes from winning, but the kind that comes from letting go. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my wallet. Inside, folded neatly behind my business card, was my grandmother's letter, the same one that had carried me through every failure, every fight, every quiet victory. When the world stops believing in you, darling, that's when you start believing harder. I smiled, tracing the faded ink with my thumb. Because now I finally understood believing harder wasn't just about proving others wrong. It was about building something stronger within yourself, something no one could steal, spend, or doubt again. I slipped the letter back into its place and whispered into the quiet room. They took $36,000 once. But what they really lost that day was the version of me who needed their approval. And for the first time in years, I felt whole.